She wasn't looking for anything that day, just walking home, lost in her thoughts, when something caught her eye, a crumpled piece of paper sticking out of an old trash can. It could have been anything: a receipt, a flyer, maybe someone's grocery list. But something about it, something about the way it was folded, carefully, then thrown away, made her stop. She hesitated, glancing around as if she was doing something wrong, then reached in and pulled it out. It was a letter, the handwriting old-fashioned, shaky, but beautiful, and the first words made her heart stop. To the one I lost before I had the courage to tell her how I felt. Her fingers trembled as she read. Each sentence felt like a whisper from a ghost, a confession left behind by someone who had carried too much silence for too long. The letter spoke of love left unsaid, of regret buried under years, of a heart that broke quietly in the background of someone else's life. She read about a man who had loved a woman from afar, a friend, perhaps, or a neighbor, someone who never knew what she meant to him. I watched you fall in love with someone else, and I smiled, because that's what love does. It lets go, even when it breaks. By the time she reached the end, tears blurred her vision. It was signed simply, J. She stood there for a long time, letter in hand, as the world moved around her. The wind picked up, and for a moment she thought she could hear his voice in it, gentle, aching, full of everything he never said. She folded the letter carefully and pressed it to her chest. She didn't know who Jay was, or who the letter was meant for, but she felt its pain, as if it had been written for her, too. Because we've all been Jay, haven't we? Loving someone we can't have. Hiding feelings because the right words never came. Watching life move on while our hearts stay behind. That night, she couldn't sleep. The letter haunted her. She wondered, was the woman still alive? Did she ever know? Or was this love buried forever under silence? So she did something she'd never done before. She wrote back. On a clean white sheet of paper, she began, "Dear Jay, whoever you were, I want you to know your words didn't die with the paper. They were found, they were felt, and somewhere, someone still believes in the love you left behind." She folded it, placed it inside an envelope, and left it where she found his letter, inside that same trash can, under the same fading light. Sometimes, love stories don't end in happy endings. Sometimes, they end in understanding. And in that quiet exchange between two strangers, one who wrote, and one who found, the world became a little softer. Because even discarded words can heal a heart, if they find the right hands to hold them. He never meant for anyone to find it. That letter, that fragile piece of his heart, was never supposed to be seen. He had written it one lonely night, under the soft flicker of a dying lamp, his hands trembling from the weight of everything he couldn't say. Her name was Anna, and she was the kind of person who could make an ordinary day feel like poetry. The kind who smiled at strangers and meant it. The kind who made you believe that kindness still existed. They met at the cafe near the library. He'd sit in the corner, writing stories he never finished, and she'd order the same tea every morning, jasmine with honey. He always wanted to tell her that her laughter was the most honest sound he'd ever heard, that she was the reason he started writing again. But he never did, because sometimes love feels too fragile to speak aloud. He watched her fall in love with someone else, a man who brought her flowers, who held her hand in public, who never once looked at the quiet man sitting in the corner. And so he wrote. Every night he poured his heart onto paper, letters he never sent, letters that smelled faintly of tea and regret. If love is silence, he wrote once, then I've been loving you louder than the world could ever hear. When Anna left the city, when the cafe closed, and the chair by the window stayed empty, he stopped writing for years. Until one night, He found one of those old letters again. He read it, smiled sadly, and realized he no longer knew who he had written it for, Anna, or the man he used to be. He took the letter outside and walked until the city fell asleep. He stopped by a small park and tossed it into a trash can. It wasn't out of anger, it was surrender, a way of letting go, a quiet funeral for the love that never was. But fate, strange, poetic fate, had other plans. Days later, someone found it. A young woman walking home saw that same crumpled letter. She read his words, and for a moment, his pain became hers. He would never know that his story had found a new heartbeat, that his words, once meant to die quietly, had touched a stranger's soul. Sometimes, that's how love works. It travels unseen, from one heart to another, carrying fragments of what we could never say out loud. If he were alive to know she found it, he wouldn't have been embarrassed. He would have smiled, softly, the way people do when something broken becomes beautiful again. Because maybe that was the point all along, that love, even when lost, still finds its way back to the world. And maybe, just maybe, somewhere in that quiet park, beneath the rustle of leaves and the hum of night, his soul whispered, "Thank you for finding my letter. Thank you for reminding me that even forgotten words can still be heard." Music swells, gentle piano outro, fading heartbeat sound, and so the letter lived on, not in the hands of the one it was meant for, but in the heart of someone who needed to read it. Love letter. It had been years since anyone had spoken his name aloud. James, that quiet man who used to sit by the cafe window, always with a notebook and an unfinished story. Back then, she thought of him as just another regular, a kind soul who smiled politely, someone who made her feel safe without ever saying much. She never knew he was writing about her, not until now. She was cleaning out her attic one morning when the postman arrived, a small brown envelope, no return address, just her name written neatly across it. Inside was a photocopy of a letter, old, creased, water-stained, but unmistakably written in James's handwriting. The note attached said, "I found this years ago in a trash can. I thought you might want to read it." Her hands trembled as she unfolded the page. The words were faded, but his voice was still there, gentle, uncertain, heartbreakingly sincere. "To the one I lost before I had the courage to tell her how I felt." The room went quiet. Outside, birds sang faintly, but inside her chest, everything stilled. She read about herself, the tea with honey, the laughter he loved, the mornings he watched her leave, and the words he never dared to say. Each line hit her like a wave, soft, then sharp, pulling her back into a time she thought she'd left behind. She remembered the day he stopped coming. The cafe closed early that evening. She had meant to ask if he was okay, but life, it pulled her away. A new job, a new city, a new chapter, and just like that, he became another memory, a ghost in the background of a story she didn't know was still being written. Her eyes blurred as she reached the last paragraph. "I watched you fall in love with someone else, and I smiled, because love doesn't demand, it gives, quietly." She pressed the letter to her chest, tears falling freely. How many times had she walked past him without knowing? How many words had she missed hiding behind his silence? She felt something she hadn't felt in years, regret. Not for the love she chose, but for the love she never noticed. Later that evening, she went back to the old park near the cafe. The benches were worn now, the trees taller. She sat there for a long time, holding the letter, whispering into the wind, "I'm sorry, James. I didn't see you then, but I see you now." And for the first time in decades, she let herself imagine what could have been, two lonely souls, one story shared between them, a quiet kind of love that lived only in the spaces between words. When she finally stood to leave, She tucked the letter beneath a small stone near the bench, not to forget, but to set it free. Because she knew now that love, even when missed, doesn't vanish. It echoes through paper, through time, through hearts brave enough to read what was once thrown away. Soft piano fades, breeze sounds, her voice barely above a whisper. You wrote to me, James, and after all these years, I'm finally writing back in the only way I can. Some words aren't meant to be kept. They're meant to find the one heart that still remembers. She couldn't stop thinking about the letter. Days had passed, yet its words still lived inside her, haunting, tender, unfinished. Who was Jay, and who was the woman he loved in silence? Her mind wouldn't rest until she found out. The handwriting was elegant, a little shaky, the kind that belonged to an older soul. The kind of person who still believed in ink and emotion. So she started searching. She visited the park again, then the streets nearby, asking quietly at old shops and cafes. Most people shook their heads, but one woman at the corner bookstore paused. James, she whispered. You mean James Rowan, the writer? Her heart skipped. Yes, maybe. Do you know where he lived? The woman smiled sadly. He used to come here every week, always with a notebook. He passed away a few years ago, never married, quiet man, kind eyes. She thanked the woman, but as she turned to leave, she saw something, a photo on the bookstore's notice board. A man, smiling softly, holding a cup of tea. It was him, the man behind the letter. Beneath the photo was a small note. In loving memory of James Rowan, a storyteller who wrote about love, even when it didn't love him back. Her chest tightened. This wasn't just a random letter anymore, it was someone's last confession. A piece of a heart left behind. She knew she couldn't just keep it. It belonged to someone who deserved to read those words. So she turned the letter over and found a faint clue. A name written at the top corner in pencil. Anna. That was enough. She searched through old directories, made phone calls, and left messages. Until one afternoon, she got a response. A woman's voice, soft but tired. This is Anna speaking. You said you found a letter. They met the next day at a small cafe, not the same one James had loved, but similar in spirit. Warm light, the smell of tea, and a quiet hum of conversation. When Anna arrived, she looked older than she'd imagined, silver hair tied neatly, eyes that had seen too much and understood even more. The young woman handed her the envelope gently. Anna didn't speak for a long time, just unfolded the paper, read, and let the silence hold her. Tears slipped down her cheeks, but her lips carried a faint, almost peaceful smile. He really wrote this, she whispered. All those years ago. The young woman nodded. I found it by accident, but somehow it didn't feel like an accident. Anna reached across the table and took her hand. Nothing like this ever is. They sat together for hours, two strangers connected by the same piece of paper, by the same story of love and loss. Before they parted, Anna said something that stayed with her forever. Tell his story. If someone finds meaning in it, then his love won't have been wasted. That night, she framed the letter not for herself, but for the world to remember him. She started a small blog titled Letters Never Meant to Be Found. The first post was James's letter, and within days, thousands had read it, shared it, and cried over it. Sometimes the smallest act, a glance into a trash can, a stranger's name on paper, can change the way the world remembers love. Because some stories aren't written to be famous, they're written to be felt. Love letter. It's been a year since the letter was found. A year since that crumpled piece of paper, once discarded, rewrote 3 lives. The young woman, Lena, still visits that same park every Sunday. Not because she's searching anymore, but because that's where the story began. where a forgotten letter whispered its truth and changed her forever. In her hands, she holds a small leather notebook. The first page reads, "In memory of James Rowan, for teaching us that love, once written, never truly dies." Lena started writing stories, not fiction, but real letters, lost confessions, messages unsent, words people never found the courage to say. She called it the archive of unspoken hearts, and it all began with him, the quiet man who loved a woman he never told, and the stranger who cared enough to listen. Anna became her first visitor. When Lena launched her small project, Anna came to the opening, walking slowly, carrying a framed copy of the letter. She placed it at the center table and smiled. "Let it lie here," she said softly, "so no one ever forgets that even silence has a voice." Her hands shook a little as she touched the frame. You could see the years behind her eyes, regret, yes, but also peace. After reading James's letter, she began writing again too. Not to him, but to herself, to the woman she used to be. "Dear Anna," one letter began, "you didn't see the love waiting quietly for you. But you learned, and that's what matters." She said writing those words helped her forgive the past, helped her breathe easier when she thought of him. The library even added something new. In a quiet corner near the poetry section, a small plaque now reads, "Letters never truly vanish. They find their way to the hearts that need them." Visitors can leave letters there, to lovers, to lost friends, to anyone they never got to say goodbye to. Some are angry, some are broken, some are simply grateful. Every month, Lena collects them, reads them, and keeps them safe like guardians of emotion that refuse to disappear. And every time she locks the box, she looks at James's letter on her desk, creased, faded, but still breathing. She often wonders, did he ever imagine this? That the words he threw away would one day become the reason strangers felt less alone. She likes to believe he'd smile. On the anniversary of his passing, Lena and Anna met again. The park was quiet, the evening light gold and kind. Anna looked at the sky and whispered, "He would have loved this sunset." Lena nodded, "I think he's watching it with us." They sat there, two generations of women, bound by one man's words, one story, one crumpled letter that refused to die. And when Anna stood to leave, she pressed a new envelope into Lena's hand. "A new letter?" Lena asked. Anna smiled, "Maybe the last one, but it's not for me." Later that night, when Lena opened it, she found just a few simple lines. "If anyone finds this someday, remember, what you throw away might be exactly what someone else is searching for. J.R." Soft piano fades in, strings swell, and that's how the story ends, not with goodbye, but with continuation. Because love, once written, doesn't fade with paper or time. It travels from one heart to another until it finally finds a home. She found a letter in a trash can and discovered that sometimes the things we throw away are the ones that save us.